Hello, this is Coach Tim Campbell, and I'm your host for the Self-Made as a Myth, Make a Difference Together show, where we are chatting with successful business owners to hear their story of the journey to building their business. And because we know that success in business is not something that we can do on our own, we're taking some time to recognize and acknowledge the folks who have helped us along the way. I'm excited to have a fellow business owner from Indiana with us today. My guest was in a band after college that toured the Western U.S. While also maintaining a full-time day job as a Republican fundraiser. So we're going to dig into that a little bit because that's intriguing. I want to learn more about that. His favorite downtime activity is spending time with family and friends, as well as flying. He is a pilot. So I'm going to ask him a little bit more about that too. That sounds exciting. And he is most proud of his kids, and even if that sounds cliche, I think that is awesome. So we'll get him to tell us about his family too. So it is my pleasure to welcome Mike to the show today. Hello, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tim. Appreciate it.
Fantastic. So, hey, let's start with having you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit of your personal story, like where you're born and live, and about your family and hobbies.
Sure. I grew up in Indiana. I've stayed in Indiana pretty much my entire life. I was born and raised in Indianapolis, and then after college, I went to IU, for college, I went to IU, and after college, I came back to Indy and stayed in Indiana. Married my wife, who I met at IU, and ended up having 3 children, and we live on the north side of Indianapolis. And we have a place down in southern Indiana that we escape to on the weekends sometimes to, get away from the big city. And I love it here. And a lot of our work, we do have a MakeMyMove, which is my company, and we'll talk about later, does have a nationwide and somewhat international footprint. But you'll notice that if you ever visit the site, a lot of Indiana presence, because that's kind of where we started. And we do care deeply about making sure the state thrives and is a wonderful place to live.
Wonderful. So, couple things. What's your wife's name?
Rebecca. And then my 3 children are 17, 15, and 11. 2 boys, they're the older ones, and then a daughter who's 11, and they keep me busy. My boys are youth hockey players, so in the wintertime, they play travel hockey. Literally, we're all in different places every weekend. I could be in Pittsburgh, but my wife's in Minneapolis, and my daughter's in it's chaos. And it gets tiring, but it's fun, and I know I'll miss it when it's gone. There's nothing more fun than the relationships that I've made with that, and getting to watch my kids learn what life is like by playing youth hockey. So it's fun.
Fantastic. So tell us about having touring in a band.
Yeah. So when I got out of college, so I studied public affairs and French when I went to IU, and I had no idea what the hell I was going to do with my life when I graduated. With those, I had dreams of being a French diplomat.
Okay.
But I had lived in a house with a bunch of musicians, and I ended up picking it up, and we ended up starting a band. And then after college, the band was kind of like, it was. We weren't famous or anything, but we had a nice following.
Yeah.
And so we decided to tour. I just gotten a job working for Jim Kittle at the Indiana Republican Party when he had taken it over as a fundraiser. And I said to them when they were interviewing me, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks at this point in time, and it was pretty early in my tenure there. And they were like, it's fine, it's fine. And so I was doing phone calls from the road, but I mean, it was a wild time. I felt like I was living this double life, I was like, living in this van and on peanut butter and jelly and beer and by day and night, and playing music at night. And meanwhile, I'm dialing, millionaires, asking them for money for the Republican Party. And I'm sure a lot of the folks I was hanging out with on the road weren't, they weren't Republicans. That's for sure.
Right.
So,
yes.
Yeah. So it was an interesting, fun time. I'll never forget it.
Very cool. And you're a pilot. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I took up the hobby. A friend of mine, Bill Osterly, who was the founder of Angie's List and just recently passed from ALS. When I was working for him at Angie's List, we both had been, we both had exchanged our enthusiasm for aviation. I've always been just, fascinated by it. And he was like, let's learn how to fly. So literally he had a flight instructor come in one day into work, and we're sitting there in the office and we're like, what do we have to do? And then it became like this race between him and I of who was going to get their pilot's license first, who was going to score higher on the written examination. But anyhow, after that, then just ended up, I bought a share of just a tiny little single prop airplane. And I didn't really use it a whole lot for business or family travel or anything. I just would take it out if I wanted to relax. There's not the part that I loved about flying was you have to concentrate, at least when you're a younger pilot, you have to concentrate so much on not dying while you're flying the airplane that you're not thinking about work or family or anything, like nothing else. I felt mentally and psychologically like refreshed and invigorated every time after I was done flying. And I went to get my my instrument rating, which is pretty intense, and it wears you down, but it really, like I said, the mental stimulation, it's really invigorating and fun. And
Very
yeah,
cool.
so I love aviation. It's a fun thing.
And then I think offline you had shared something about inheriting a powered parachute.
Oh yeah. So um, when one of the things that we like to tinker around with, it wasn't just airplanes, it was a thing, and a type of plane called a powered parachute, which is basically a cart with 3 wheels, a giant propeller attached to it, and a parachute attached to it. And like anyone could really fly one of these things. It's not rocket science. Literally, the throttle controls whether you go up or down.
I think I see them flying around the freeway.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what
you
you're
probably do. And so, we got into some of those, and he ended up buying a few of them. And I have some funny stories of just ridiculous, like maybe we should have died kind of stuff. Because we weren't trained, and we were just out at the airport flying these things. But anyhow, when he passed, I was gifted the powered parachute. So
nice.
yeah, we'll see if I mean, it's been sitting in a garage for like 2 years. It probably needs a good look over by a certified mechanic.
Very cool. Well, you'll have to send me a picture when you take that.
Yeah. I'll do that.
Hey, Mike, is there a funny story that your family likes to tell about you that you'd be willing to share with us today?
Yeah, I thought, gosh, there are several. I think maybe the best one, and it's not my family, it's my family that I grew up with. One of the best. So I was the youngest by 6 years. I was a complete accident, and I think I ended up being my parents' favorite. So I'm joking, but my dad used to tell this story about how when and this just tells you how times have changed. She was 32 and she was pregnant with me. And he came home from work and she was stirring a pot of soup. And this was when she found out she'd gone to the doctor that day. And she, she's crying, and just, wailing. And my dad's like, what is wrong? What is wrong? And she says, I'm 32 and I'm pregnant. Like she was very unhappy to be pregnant with me. And so was my dad. But I mean, 32 today is we didn't even have our first child until we were 31 years old. So, so anyhow, yeah, I was a mistake, but I think it turned out okay.
I love it. So they started out with them crying about you, and then you became their favorite. And
they loved me. I took care of them. I stayed in Indianapolis. So they both got sick as they got older, and I stayed in Indianapolis and took care of them. Well, my siblings were off doing fun stuff.
And now you're flying and you're playing with powered parachutes.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, tell us about how the business came to be, and at what point did you have the confidence that you could run your own business?
Sure. So I guess a little background on the origin story. So the business was essentially started with Bill Osterly, the gentleman I mentioned earlier who had founded Angie's List. I met Bill when I was working for Mitch Daniels raising money because he had taken a leave of absence from Angie's List to run Mitch's campaign.
Yeah.
After Mitch's campaign, he ended up recruiting me to Angie's List, and I ended up spending 11 years there. So when Angie's List was sold in 2017, Bill had been gone for a couple years, and he reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, what are you going to do with your life?" And I was kind of like, "Leave me alone. I want to just smell the roses for a second." And of course, the next night we're at a bar having a beer, and he's telling me this idea that he has around using some of the marketing tactics and strategies that we used at Angie's List, because Angie's List was a huge marketing company, obviously a well-known national consumer brand, and we spent gobs of money becoming that. And he said, "Hey, like I think we could use a lot of the things that we did at Angie's List to help communities attract talent and recruit people into their community." And the population and workforce shortage was not even, I mean, it was kind of out there, but no one was really talking about it at that point in time.
Right.
And he'd been studying some of these demographic, like some of these economists that were telling us, "Hey, like there's going to be an issue here in about 5 to 10 years." Happened earlier than I think everybody imagined with the pandemic. But we started a company called TMAP that was oriented around using data and targeted marketing to find people to recruit to your community. Well, when the pandemic happened, we saw a bunch of communities that were starting to offer incentives to folks to relocate there, primarily targeting remote workers, because suddenly you had this new segment of the workforce, this huge segment, and one of the more valuable segments of the workforce, right? High income folks that had suddenly become geographic free agents.
Right.
And this migration was happening. And by the way, it's just starting. Like we are just scratching the surface right now. I've got to hope that the housing market will unfreeze a little bit. And I think that's going to just I don't know, I think it'll really be moving then. But we saw these communities that were offering these incentives to these workers to relocate to their community. And we were kind of going, there's a marketplace here. There's suddenly this market of geographic free agents. There's these communities that need people, need population, need children, need workforce. And so need higher income workforce. And so we basically just aggregated all those communities, and it was fewer than 20 at that point in time on the site. And we just wanted to see if we could get traffic. And lo and behold, we got a very, very decent amount of traffic, and we decided, okay, this is the direction we're going to take the business. And so now we're really, really focused on building this marketplace where communities can effectively merchandise themselves and tell their stories, and why you should live in this community, to an audience of people that are considering relocating and looking for this place that they're going to be able to live and connect with and actually become part of the community. So it's tremendous fun. It's a really neat business. And seeing the movers, that are happy when they move, and the communities that are actually, for one, they actually feel a sense of pride for once. My biggest objection that I get is we don't think people would want to move here, from a lot of communities. And when they see people actually do, it's neat.
That is awesome. So tell us a little bit more about the company. What's the name and how does it work?
The company's called MakeMyMove. If you just go to MakeMyMove.com, you will see a variety of different communities all across the country that are offering programming, dollar hard dollar incentives,
Right.
other things to people who decide I want to apply
Mm,
to this program. And the programs require you to relocate to that community, and actually live in that community and have a job, work in that community. So you're contributing tax dollars and new consumer spending. And the communities basically take all these applicants and run them through a recruiting funnel, right? Like introduce them to folks in the community, help them find housing, all the things that people need in order to make that decision to relocate and ultimately relocate.
yeah. Do the communities help them find a job as well?
But some do.
Yeah.
So most of the communities are oriented around recruiting remote workers.
Okay.
But there are a variety of communities on our site that do remote worker recruiting as well as workforce recruiting.
Okay.
So, they're building a database of people who are literally, that are applying and
Yeah.
saying, hey, I'm interested in moving to your community. Tell me why I should.
Yeah.
So the fascinating part about this is not a muscle or an activity that communities know how to do,
Sure.
right? They've never been asked to. They've always been B2B marketers. So economic development has always marketed to employers to attract a company to open up headquarters or open up some operations in that community. And when they land them, then they hire 80% of the folks from within that community, right? They create those jobs. That play worked great, and it still does to some degree, but it doesn't work nearly as well when you have more jobs than people, right?
Sure.
When you need
Yeah.
people, this build it and they will come thing doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily work. And so, we think of this as an economic development activity. It's
Yeah.
just retail economic development,
Sure.
right? To consumers and not to companies.
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed at the value of a household to a community. So, we actually had an economist from IU that did some research for us and put together an economic model. It was really expensive, by the way, but it was worth every penny. But Muncie, Indiana, for instance, Muncie, Indiana has moved 45 new households into Muncie in the last year. Average income about $100,000. That 100 each $100,000 household is worth $83,000 of new economic activity. That means
Oh, wow.
$13,000 of new annual tax revenue and $70,000 of new consumer spending.
Right.
And each one creates over half of a job. So when you get 45 families, suddenly you look at the economic value that you've created, and that's just 1 year, right? They're going to
Sure.
stay for 5, 6, 7 years.
Sure.
So the return on the investment is extraordinary. Tulsa, Oklahoma, who's the community we worked with, for every $1 they put into that program, they've generated, I believe it's $13 of ROI.
Incredible.
So yeah, it's
very, very cool. So Mike, share a story where someone pushed or inspired you that you could do it even though maybe you didn't think that you could, and the impact that that person had on you.
Gosh, I'll probably go. I'll start with Bill on these questions, just because I think this was one of those moments in my career that changed the trajectory. Angie's List was just starting to scale. They had just started national television advertising, and the sales organization was starting to grow. And we were about a year from taking the company public. I don't think taking the company public was necessarily on the radar at this point in time, but the gentleman who was running sales for Angie's List had about 150 person organization, and he ended up having to move back to North Carolina, which was where he was from. And so, the job was open, and I was literally, I remember talking to people, and they were like, you should take that job. And I was like, I don't want that job. Literally, I was saying, I don't want that job. That sounds like a grind, and which, the sales organization was kind of this like interesting organism, these were rough and tumble, transactional salespeople, and HR had tons of fun working with them, but they had their work cut out for them also. Bill came to me and he's like, I think you're built for this. Let's give it a go. And I didn't say no, but I did kind of go, oh man, hey, and he was like, you're doing this, you know. And so you know, it was one of these things. It was man, it was fun because one, we were growing fast. Two, we suddenly started this process to take the company public, and I was playing a pretty key role in that. You know, I mean, I'm talking to the analysts, I'm presenting at Investor Day, you know, working on the pro forma and really running the revenue side of the business through that transaction. And then the growth was intense. You know, I mean, we went from 150 people in the sales organization to almost 1,000 2 years later.
Wow.
So it was just, and you know, the funny part, Tim, is I didn't really have any idea what I was doing, you know, but it was working.
Right?
It was working, and it's great. So I remember a good friend of mine who I connected with in the middle of all that. He was like, "Man, how do you manage so many people?" And I was like, "I hire great people, you
Yeah,
know,
there you go.
like I have great people that work with me to
Yeah.
actually like do the work, you know, and run the business." So, but yeah, I would have never, you know, I don't know that I would have ever taken on, you know, a challenge like that
Yeah.
in an organization like that if it hadn't been for Bill.
Wonderful. Hey, I'm sure there's many, but what's your biggest learning as a business owner?
I think to remain calm.
Hmm.
I was thinking about this one when I was looking at the questions. You know, no business ever nothing ever goes according to plan. You know,
Right.
um, I was like, seriously. I mean, I read a lot of books about, you know, wars and generals and things like that, and literally, you look at the best made plans never end up panning out, and they always have to adapt and they always have to change. And so, when things aren't going your way, I think the best thing to do is not to panic, right, and just remain calm and evaluate your options. There's always options, you
Yeah.
know, like there's always options. Now, sometimes they're not good,
Hmm.
you know, or some are better than others. But you know, there's always ways to address issues and fix things.
Yeah.
So I'd say probably my number one thing would be remain calm. Another theme that I thought about was, you know, pay attention to your intuition and
Mm.
your gut.
Yeah.
Sometimes your mind is telling you things,
Yes.
and if you're not listening,
Yes.
um, like you can you can it's almost like selective avoidance. It's like, oh, I know that this,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, don't let that happen. If you feel like there's something around the corner lurking, and don't wait to walk around the corner, you know, uh find out, address
Mhm.
it, and let that gut and like that sense and that intuition just you have to kind of fine tune it and be able to know how to listen to yourself sometimes, I think.
It truly is like a muscle, right? In terms of, you know, our gut or our intuition or our instinct, whatever word you want to call it, our mastermind. Um, you know, it does have answers and does have guidance and direction for us that our conscious mind can't necessarily see. So, you know, things like meditation, right, or
Yeah,
exercise or quiet time, like being able to get away from the day to day and listen to what our mind's telling us. There are always answers in there, but oftentimes we're just running too fast to be able to listen to
yeah.
it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I think that I've, you know, I've been a CEO for 2 years now, and you know, I was with this ambulance company early on, but this is a very different thing. But you know, you have to learn how to work differently, you
Mhm.
know, and hustle is not always the answer.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, I'd say more often than not, hustle is not the answer. So,
Mhm.
so I think that's something you have to kind of you have to train yourself to
Yeah.
do.
I share with our clients and some education seminars that we do that, you know, the hustle and grind concept has been romanticized more recently, but all hustle and grind does is leads to burnout. Right.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
right, it's okay to do for the first couple years of starting a new business, but it's not sustainable. Right.
Well, sometimes you just got to back up. you know, and like, what's happening? You know, like what is going on and where are we taking this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Now, don't get me wrong, hustle matters, you know, it does, but you can overdo it. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. It's more like short sprints of hustle, right? But then
Yeah.
you need to recover and rest and think,
Yeah.
process, and then, do another little sprint. But if you're just constantly running, then to your point, you're going to miss out on things that we need to be reflecting on and processing and and considering in terms of what's the next right step. And our instinct has a lot of knowledge if we just slow down and listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and again, it's selective of you know, we tend to avoid things that we don't like doing. Right?
Right? Yeah.
You know, it could be, you know, making a personnel decision and letting someone go, which to me, you know, that's one that I've been very intentional about, you know, because it's my least favorite activity as a
Sure.
manager, but I also think it's one of the most important things to, you know, to do. You don't let problems linger because it affects not just the organization, the business itself, but the people in the business.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
funny. I'll have conversations with people and they're like, "Hey, Tim, I don't know what to do about this situation." I'm like, "Well, talk me through it." And they'll talk me through it. I'm like, "It sounds like you know
Mhm.
exactly what you need to
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right.
right?
That's funny. That's
And it's like,
true.
okay, well, just do what you just told me because that's what you need to do.
That's 100% true. I love it.
Mike, we know that business success doesn't happen in isolation. So tell us about one of your biggest challenges as a business owner and maybe a fellow business owner that came alongside you and helped you through that.
Oh man. Gosh, let me think about this. It's probably I'll tell the ambulance company story. So you know, after the Mitch Daniels campaign, a gentleman here in town, his name is Tom Godby. He owns a heating and air conditioning business, but he also had an ambulance company, a few other. He's just a serial entrepreneur. He comes to me and he's like, "Hey, I've got this ambulance company. It's basically ready to go bankrupt. Do you want to come and try and fix it?" And I'm like, I don't know anything about ambulance companies or or healthcare, you know, and I've never run a business. He's like, it's okay, you know, you'll figure it out. I love it. You know, it was one of those things. That's probably one of the great story about someone who put me in an uncomfortable, you know, situation. That was really good for me,
Yeah.
and it ended up being, you know, total triage business management. You know, the first 2 weeks, you know, I remember there was a 24-hour period. I was sitting there. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I was talking to the controller. And literally, I mean, like this is my second week, and we're looking at you know the finances and everything, and I'm like, I don't know that we have enough money in the bank for payroll, you know. And she's like, "Oh no, we're definitely not going to make payroll this week." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" You know, I'm finding this out on Wednesday. And then the dispatchers, I'm not joking. This is 15 minutes later. The dispatchers come running into my office and they're like, "Hey, the radios aren't working. The radios aren't working." They're like,
Oh no.
this is, and I'm going, this is a pretty important thing for an ambulance company to have radios. And it turns out I said, "Well, have you called the you know, the communications company?" No, you know, so they called, and of course we were behind on payment. And so, you know, we ran them a check and got our radios turned on. And I went home to my wife and I was like, "Man, that place is like, this is pretty crazy. This is tough." And that I woke up the next day and was doing more, just learning more. And it turned out we didn't have liability insurance
Oh,
because our policy left. Yeah, there was this weird thing, and it just happened. So I'm on the horn with the insurance guy, and I called Tom that day, and I'm like, "Tom, man, you know," and this was one of those things where he was like, "Remain calm. It's okay. You know, we'll cover payroll, you know, like just get the thing back on its, you know, back on its feet to where
yeah.
you can, you know, where you can keep it, you know." And so, you know, so it was one of these things. It was baby steps, but we ended
Uh-huh.
up, it ended up getting profitable, and then we ended up selling it about a year and a half later. So that was one of those moments where it was like, you know, remain calm.
Yeah.
You know, we can figure this out. Yeah.
Well, the good news is that he was transparent up front and told you that the business was dying.
Oh yeah, he
So,
was. He
so
was.
you
Yeah, it
came in with
wasn't.
your eyes wide open, right?
Yeah, it wasn't like. Yeah, that's true. It was what. I should have listened better. That was a good lesson.
Right.
It was a great, trust me, it was a great experience, but it was one of those things where it's like, I was like, oh yeah, okay, no problem. It's, you know, it's on the verge of bankruptcy. We can fix that. And then you get in there and you're going, whoa, you know, this is pretty intense.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know you meant today it was on bankruptcy.
Yeah,
I thought you meant
yeah,
we had a year or something. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Mike, if I'm going to put you on the spot here, if I asked you to pick 3 people in your business owner journey that you're most grateful for them being there to help with your business's growth, who are those 3 people and how they help you?
Well, so I'm probably going to go back rather than just talking. These are folks who helped shape me and kind of my habits and how I do things, rather than are helping me with the business that are helping me with the business today. But Jim Kittle, for sure, is, you know, one of the number one folks. He was, you know, he was running the Indiana Republican Party. He's a local businessman. I don't know if you've heard of him, but Kittle's Furniture, and just a very active civic person and a smart business guy. And I came into the Indiana Republican Party as a totally inexperienced fundraiser. And man, he taught me how to grind, and he also taught me how to don't delay anything. You know, if you have something you got to do, if you got to pick up the phone and have a conversation with someone, pick up the phone and have a conversation with someone. I remember the first fundraising trip we had was down to Tell City, Indiana. And we flew in this little, single prop airplane down to Tell City. We ended up raising $30,000 for the state party out of Tell City, which was huge. I mean, that was, that's more than any governor had raised out of. And I remember we were dismounting the airplane after we landed back in Indianapolis, and I was all of 2 or 3 weeks in, and I was like, "Hey, $30,000 out of Tell City, that's pretty good." And I'm not joking. He looks at me and he goes, "Well, I guess you get to keep your job." And then he just turned around. He just turned around and walked away. No goodbye or anything like that. That was it. I was like, "See you tomorrow," kind of thing. So. He just kind of taught me, don't take anything for granted. Do your job.
Wonderful.
And don't expect too much. And Tom Godby, who obviously, kind of gave me the keys to, a company that he, was having trouble with, and, was there with me kind of the whole time, when I needed a shoulder to cry on or some advice or what. He was there. And so, and then just the fact that he trusted me with that was, the lessons I learned from that was invaluable. And then Bill Osterly, of course, and Bill just taught me, gosh, he taught me so many lessons. I can't even think about them. But the number one, I think the number one lesson I learned from him was, even when you're worried or afraid, just have courage. Being in business sometimes requires courage. Yes. And conviction, and you have to stick with it. And so, he was fearless. Yeah. Which I don't know that he was fearless. I think he was probably more courageous than fearless, but he was willing to take chances, and then if things didn't work out, plan B. So I just learned a lot from him about being courageous.
I love that term, courageous, because the reality is that we're hardwired to prefer our comfort zone, right? Evolutionarily, right? We're not supposed to leave the cave because we'll get eaten. So we stay in our comfort zone, and unfortunately, right, everything we want in life is on the other side of our comfort zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's an awesome word of, if we're courageous enough to step out of the cave, right, we're going to experience the things we want to have in life.
When I was I even say this to my managers today, but when I was managing at Angie's List and I had a bunch of sales managers, I said to them, when I would talk with them, I'm like, "What uncomfortable conversation have you had lately?" And I would ask them that intentionally, because I was constantly telling them, like, "Look, if you're not having uncomfortable conversations, you're not doing your job."
Yes.
You have to be able to speak directly to people to help them improve. Now, just because uncomfortable doesn't mean toxic, right? It doesn't mean angry. It doesn't mean mean. It just means direct and transparent and compassionate.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people want they want real, authentic feedback, even if it's not good,
Yeah.
most of the time. And so to me, you know, the only way you're really going to move the dial, I love what you said. Everything you want is on that other side of that comfort zone. You know, you have to get used to being uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a term called perturbation that we introduce our clients to. And
I don't know that one.
it's that idea of that constant uncomfortableness of, because we're either growing or we're dying. There's no status quo. So if we want to stay in our comfort zone, we're actually dying because everyone around us is growing and we're not. So I like your philosophy of daily, right? What are we doing to make ourselves uncomfortable today, to grow and stretch and evolve so that we're working towards, you know, the things that we want out of life?
Yeah, I love that. I love that concept.
Mike, let's think about the future. So over the next 3 to 5 years, what are the biggest challenges you see that you're going to face in reaching your business goals, and who are the types of folks that you're going to need to help you resolve those?
I'd say probably first and foremost is you know, capitalizing the business. You know, the economic climate has changed pretty dramatically. You know, we are VC funded, and then also we have angel investors, you know, in our business. The angels are great. You know, they're sort of kind of there when we need them. If we, you know, intend to raise and capitalize with some venture money, I just think everyone that I've spoken to right now that's in the market is like, man, it's tough. It's tough to even get them to say yes. And it's even more difficult to get to agree on a valuation.
Sure.
So I think that, you know, I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we're going to be facing. And for me, we talk about comfort zones. You know, I raise money for political campaigns, and I've raised some money for this business, but we haven't done a large fundraise. You know, a lot of it's been through angel investors that I knew, or,
Right.
you know, through our venture partner that we started with.
Well, hey, maybe you need to go down to that little town in Indiana and where you got that $30,000 for your campaign. Right?
Yeah, Del City. It's a good idea. Yeah, so to me, like I've got a lot to learn in that regard. So that's part of it. That's one of the challenges. I think the second challenge is more macroeconomic, which is you know, one of the things that has we're getting tons of traffic to the website. We're getting people applying to programs, but housing is somewhat of a barrier in some of the communities where we work, right? There's people that want to move into a community, but there is no housing. Yeah. And a lot of that is because interest rates are so high, right? Everybody's sitting there going, well, you know, I'm locked in at 3%, 2.5%. And I would be interested in selling my house and moving to a new house, but I don't want to go get into a 6 or 7%. And so supply is down because people are holding onto their homes. And I think that's making things more challenging for us for sure. But I also, you know, one, I think things hopefully will change. I think they kind of have to at some point in time. And two, we're still finding ways around that. You know, I mean, there's property management companies we're starting partnerships with, and a variety of other things we're doing to kind of circumvent that issue. But I'd say those are probably the two largest issues that we face as a business.
Awesome. Hey, last question here, Mike. Jim Rohn, awesome business guru, says we become the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. So as you think about that, what advice would you have for business owners who are doing it on their own and you know, think that, you know, that they can't or shouldn't, you know, ask other people for help?
Oh man. Well, number one, asking someone for help is the best way to make a friend, in my opinion. I like even if you don't know someone, a cold email, if you're authentic and you're real, you know, I at least what I've found is a lot of people will answer that email and give you some time. I'd say the second thing is spend time learning. I don't think that necessarily means reading books. I think it means talking to folks, other business owners, competitors,
Mhm.
whatever it is you're thinking about or working on or struggling with. There's tons of other folks out there that know more than you.
Right?
Go out and talk to them. And by the way, you can develop really great friendships with these folks and relationships, and those relationships can turn into new business opportunity. I mean, I've seen it 1,000 times where
Yeah.
you meet with someone and then 2 years later, you're doing some kind of business with them.
Yeah.
So I think learning and developing relationships with people are two of the most important things you can do. One, because it's fun and life is short, and I thrive on people. So that to me is a ton of fun. But two, because it does open up roads and paths that you never would have thought of or never would have occurred to you.
I love what you said about, don't be afraid to make that cold outreach. So a lot of folks say to me, Tim, they're successful, they're busy, they're not going to have time for me. How would you respond to that?
Well, I would say if you write them an email that's compelling and interesting, then they probably will answer that email or pick
Yeah.
up that phone.
Yeah.
If it's just, hey, I need, my advice, like, don't be afraid. You'll never get anything if you don't ask,
Yeah.
right? So you'll never have a chance
Yes.
to talk or learn from this person if you don't ask. So one is ask. Two is ask in a way that's going to make it interesting to them and going to make them want to talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the thing I've found is, um, we all like talking about ourselves, right? We all like talking about the journey we've been through. We all like the idea that maybe our journey could help others. So to your point, Mike, if the outreach is through that vein of, hey, I've noticed that you've done this or that, and I'd love to hear more about your story, 'cause
Yeah,
I think there's something that I could benefit from. Most people are going to love to talk about themselves, right?
exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you've done this and I'm struggling with this. Would you mind giving me half an hour? Can I buy you a cup of coffee or can I buy you lunch?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Mike, it sounds like you've been blessed with some incredible people that have helped you in your journey. If they were all here on the show today, what would you want to say to them?
Thanks. You know, yeah, but I like to think it's a two-way street. They gave me a tremendous amount, but I feel like I also gave back to them.
Mm.
And so there's this mutually beneficial thing there. But yeah, I mean, thank you would really be my core message, and like I said, life is short. I'm 40. Excuse my language. I'm 48 now. And I look back on all the relationships and all the people that I've met through my work, and a lot of them are just friends. A very important part of my life. So I would say these relationships haven't just affected me as a business professional; they've affected me as a human being.
Mm.
And I will not regret a thing. Whenever my number gets called, I won't regret a thing, because these relationships have been so valuable and great experience for me.
Awesome. So cool to hear that the combination of business and personal relationships, and I just love that idea of, hey, that it's reciprocal, right? That the people that are in our life, we've benefited each other, as opposed to it just being a one-way street.
Yeah. And by the way, I know that there's this whole you can't mix business with personal relationships. And I think that's crap.
Mm.
I love working with friends.
Yeah.
Now, like, things can go wrong,
Mhm.
but if you have a strong relationship with them and you have that trust, man, it really helps you get things done.
Yes.
And if things do go wrong, if you go into it with eyes wide open and with a realization that things could go haywire, typically, there's no hard feelings.
Well, you mentioned earlier about the transactional versus what you're just describing now. Like, we all prefer to work with people we know, like, and trust, and it helps us through when things don't go exactly the way that we wanted them to, because we can rely on that personal relationship, right? To
Yeah.
say, we'll make it right, but give me some grace and some patience to work through this.
Yeah, for sure. It just makes sense to me.
Yeah. Mike, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Tim. I appreciate it. It was nice talking to you.
To everyone who tuned in, thanks for listening to the Self-Made is a Myth show with your host, Coach Tim Campsell. Be sure to help us spread the movement by liking the show and posting it on your social media. And to join our movement, go to bemadtogether.com. All right, folks, that's a wrap. Make sure to pay it forward, and I'll see you all next time. Take care.